Chapter 3, On the Field. Our family finally arrived to our field on November 19th, 2019. Heidi offered to get a few things for our home like hangers and helped set up the girls' closet. After that first week, however, her attention quickly dissipated. It wasn't long before Patrick told us the Music Academy building had to relocate because city regulation no longer allowed business signs visible from the second floor in that area. In actuality, Patrick wanted a single building for all church and music academy activities combined rather than two separate locations. Confused by the sudden change, we had no workspace. The Music Academy building we knew was no longer going to be there. In addition, the building was filled with working church staff, their NGO, non-governmental organization office, and a small bakery with its workers. There was nowhere for Chad to have an office. The music school was not currently functioning anyway, so we thought we'd just wait to start fresh with the new location. Soon after our arrival, another couple from our agency came to visit Patrick and Heidi. We had just met them a few months prior at the annual conference in the States. We didn't know they were in town until they had already left. I was very disappointed we hadn't been invited to meet with them. I was desperate for connection. They were from our own agency. Over the course of the first 6 weeks, we were expected to attend all meetings and special events amidst setting up our household and hosting our own Christmas caroling party for the church. I was overwhelmed by the combination of tasks at home paired with outside activities. We were busy learning how to perform basic functions in our new environment, like figuring out what we could eat and obtaining groceries, getting around via various modes of transportation, and trying to communicate with people who spoke a foreign language. It was challenging and exasperating. Our family traveled everywhere via Uber, except for a couple offers for rides from our field team leaders. They were engrossed in holiday activities and 2 short-term missions trip teams from the US. It was very, very busy. Congruently, we had a couple solid weeks of language lessons to undertake. Our children were overwhelmed by the culture change, struggling to eat the local flavors, combating food allergy mishaps, and fighting sickness from the different germs in that country. Due to the busyness of the field, Patrick and Heidi didn't have time for one-on-one connection with us. There was one short check-in during December, late one evening after a Friday night small group. They didn't have time to help us secure another vehicle, give us any guidance on what it took to register as a foreigner, or find a different bank that actually allowed international transfers. Following Christmas, the church staff took the week off. Things got quiet. Too quiet. We attended one birthday party that week. Then Patrick and his family left the next week to visit where he grew up. After their return, surely I thought they would reconnect with us and check how we were doing. Nope. For the 3rd week in a row, I was left alone in that 14th floor apartment with my children. There was no one else on this team from our agency. It was just us and them. I felt like I was alone on an island in the middle of an ocean, even though I was surrounded by a city of 30-some million just outside my window. It was such a strange feeling. During their absence, we stayed busy looking for other building options to suit both church and music academy multi-purpose activities. We toured several buildings with one of the church staff and subsequently returned to our flat to draw up floor plans that could fit these different spaces. It was a lot of fun to create these drawings, envisioning what the building space could look like and how it would function. At the end of 3 weeks apart, our family toured the same building options again with Patrick now that he was back from vacation. At the end of these tours, our family found ourselves headed to his 2-story apartment to discuss what we'd seen. I texted Heidi on the way, offering to help order dinner since it was last-minute decision of Patrick's for us to come over. Our kids were so happy to see their 2 children again, and they all ran upstairs to play together. I was relieved. I had not seen our team for 3 weeks and had not received any check-ins or messages either. This meant our kids had also been without connection. Chad and I sat down on their couch, and I was immediately comforted to be in a familiar space again. However, Heidi was very cold. Patrick asked her to come over and sit down for the meeting with us. She refused and stayed in the kitchen cooking extra chicken for our family, apparently. We began discussing the building search. Every time Patrick asked me a question, Heidi boisterously butted into the conversation from the kitchen, cutting off my ability to speak. Patrick even stopped her once and said he wanted to hear what I had to say. Heidi was very rude. She finally came over and sat down, and that's when they told us they were expecting their third child. Patrick said his family was also working on plans to shift apartments. We had just finished settling into our apartment, but now everything else that we knew had plans for shifting. The pastor's home, the music building, and the church building. I felt so unstable as everything on the field seemed to be up in the air, yet we were the only thing settled. Although we hadn't really even settled yet because there was no car, no working bank, no real team, and a growing sense of alarm. We also found out from Patrick that our stateside field team director, Joe, was trying to arrange a visit that month. Patrick had turned him down with the excuse that he was too busy to have him come. Patrick's decision to keep the field director from coming gave no consideration to our thoughts, needs, wants, or desires. Joe's visit and presence on the field at this crucial time wasn't just for Patrick, rather, it would have been beneficial for us. Ironically, in a few short days, Jerry and his wife Janet and their friends the Wilsons were due to visit the field and stay for the weekend. It was time to eat. I got up from the couch and walked into the kitchen to dish our children's plates for dinner. That's when I saw it. Heidi's phone was lit up on the counter lying next to the serving area. I saw the most recent text she had sent to Patrick. As long as it doesn't run up to dinner. Regarding the meeting we just had and the dinner I was now dishing onto my kids' plates. My heart sank. I'd been isolated in a foreign country for 3 weeks, finally trying to reconnect with our field team leaders, and she didn't even want us there. We stayed and ate dinner. We didn't eat much, and the extra chicken wasn't actually needed. Right before we left, I asked Heidi if we could make a plan for the following weekend since we were to host Jerry, Janet, and the Wilsons. Her flippant response was, "Oh, we'll just hang out." My suggestion fell flat. I felt ignored. Our family left for the evening and took an Uber back to our flat. Our first interaction after 3 weeks of no meaningful connection or supportive communication spoke volumes. The message came across loud and clear from Heidi. "Now that you're finally here and settled, I don't want you around, and nothing you have to say is worth hearing." I was crushed. This behavior may be excusable if you're in your home country, but when you're a brand new missionary on a foreign field, nothing feels familiar or safe. You literally feel like a helpless baby lying on the ground, flailing your arms and legs. You need to be picked up and held in a loving embrace. You desperately look for the hands that feed you and help you learn to walk in those early months. Anything less than nurturing, loving, and attentive care feels like sabotage from the ones who committed to bringing you onto their field in the first place. The next day, I texted Patrick and Heidi on our team thread asking if we could at least come up with a meal plan while we had the two couples visiting. It wasn't long before Patrick sent a very detailed schedule for our visitors filled with ministry events. I was surprised because Heidi had told me the very opposite. We finally did agree to a basic meal schedule, so I was able to make plans for cooking and hosting our guests at certain times. A few days later, Jerry, Janet, and the Wilsons arrived. They spent the first evening over at Patrick and Heidi's flat. For some reason, we weren't invited. Then, they messaged us that plans were changing and they would be spending tomorrow's breakfast together too. We were not invited. I was completely distraught. I'd been feeling isolated and dropped by our field team leaders, and now our mentors were in town but not able to be with us for the first 24 hours. I'd even adjusted the kids' homeschool schedule to accommodate being with Jerry and Janet that Friday morning. I was dying inside. Neither Chad nor I raised any issue with the sudden change of plans. I don't know why we didn't speak up, but I do know we were incredibly disoriented. We were also trusting our leaders to know what they were doing and didn't want to disrupt their plans or come against their wishes. We could have spoken up had we been able to think straight, but neither did they ask us what we needed or wanted. While they met together the next morning, we busied ourselves by going to the car dealership. Our Hindu neighbor had actually stepped in to help us purchase a vehicle, something that should have been immediately rectified by our field team leader Patrick the minute the first one was sold off. We've been taking Uber everywhere for 2 solid months, which was very stressful and uncomfortable. Trying to work with the app, the payment, the drivers, the timing, and maneuvering and traveling around the bustling beehive of a city while squished and sweaty in the back seat of those tiny cars with my 3-year-old on my lap had taken its toll on us. We finally got to sit down in our apartment and share with Jerry and Janet our struggle with the lack of team meetings and our majorly disappointing time with Patrick and Heidi several months before. Jerry and Janet's way of handling this unfortunate series of events was simply to say, "Oh, Claire, it's not you, it's Heidi." Chad even requested Jerry to ask Patrick for regular team meetings, just like we had gone over 3 months before in our team expectations meeting led by Jerry. His response to Chad was, "You ask him." Jerry had acted as mediator in prior meetings between us and Patrick, both in the States and on the field, so why couldn't he do this now when we asked for help? That weekend, Janet, Mrs. Wilson, and I attended a bridal shower at Heidi's house. When we walked in the door, Heidi had just finished exuberantly greeting and warmly hugging one of their church attendees into her home. I walked in next and received no such welcome. I sat down next to Mrs. Wilson and made a side comment. "It sure would be nice to be greeted like that." Mrs. Wilson had witnessed the ensuing scene and agreed something was off kilter. Aside from these issues, the focus during Jerry, Janet, and the Wilsons' visit was still on the music building search. One location in particular had piqued Patrick's interest. Chad had created a detailed, multi-page proposal for this building project, ultimately concluding it was too expensive. Never mind having a team meeting to discuss how we were doing, what we needed, or how they could help meet those needs. Never mind being treated with kindness, respect, and hospitality. When all of us met together at our home the final evening, I had prepared a delicious stir-fry meal, a welcome change from the local food. Next was tea and snacks. Finally, I ended the meal delighting our guests with a fancy tray of various ice cream bars for both adult and child alike. The kids secured their treats and scampered off to play in the girls' bedroom. Internally, my mind was longing for our leaders to address the elephant in the room and work through the problems that had arisen within our team dynamics. Sadly, no one said anything, and I was afraid to bring it up on such a lovely night for all 6 of our guests during the last meal of their stay. Soon, our well-fed guests began to pack for their airport departure. Jerry and Janet gathered their belongings and emptied themselves from our guest bedroom. We gave hugs and they walked out the door with their suitcases, satisfied they had fulfilled their duty of supporting us by visiting the field. I'm not sure they realized they left us with unaddressed team issues or the fact they spent hours upon hours with Patrick and Heidi without us. Jerry had promised to play a game with our kids and didn't have time, yet he spent hours alone with Patrick. Jerry had also promised to show our kids how he cut and ate a pomegranate, and he didn't have time to do that either. We'd been on the field 2 months, and I felt abandoned by Jerry and Janet as well. Little did we know there had been chatter amongst everyone that weekend because Patrick had recently started a chauffeuring business as another means of supposedly supporting ministry, and he had a special guest coming. The stress was on Patrick to find an armored vehicle for this event, something that was not readily available in the city. After the big event, we discovered the special guest, chauffeured by Patrick's business, had been none other than Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos. No wonder Jerry and Patrick had needed so much time together. Our agency back home was of little help. Chad received a few calls from Micah now and then checking in, but Micah and his family were very busy support raising and settling into their new home and his new role in the home office. I reached out to his wife once and didn't hear back for weeks. Janet called me once a month, but she and Jerry were busy support raising, wrapping up their current jobs, selling their house, and moving to another state in their transition to the agency. Patrick was swamped with church, the chauffeur business, his pregnant wife, and shifting. He told everyone on staff to stop asking him for anything. Chad felt he couldn't approach Patrick and ask for team meetings. We didn't know what to do. We were also struggling with handling our finances because of the bank Patrick took us to on our pre-trip would not actually make any international wire transfers. We were stuck trying to pay rent, electricity, groceries, and everything else through ATM withdrawals. It was incredibly stressful, and Chad was barking at me to stop paying for groceries with cash. What was I to do if our credit cards weren't working either for the grocery store? We had to eat. My birthday came and went. Our family went to the zoo and to an American diner. I wish I could have said it was completely enjoyable, but I felt like I was dying inside. Additionally, I don't know why my birthday was never celebrated in the church's Friday night small group. They always honored special events for everyone else by providing a cake for birthdays, anniversaries, etc. When I saw Heidi next, her comment was, "Oh, it's the birthday person's responsibility to throw the party for everyone else." I had a phone call from my parents and got to hear my grandpa wish me a happy birthday. I could hardly utter a word in reply, as a raging river held inside of me threatened to trickle through the dam wall, resulting in an exploding, cascading force. I had to control it. It wasn't just culture shock. It was neglect, abandonment, and a growing sense of betrayal because of broken team expectations. I felt forgotten and unimportant. I was so distraught. I stopped brushing my teeth and taking care of regular hygiene. I thought about curling up in the fetal position in the corner of the bedroom, wishing desperately that I could just disappear. I even thought about throwing myself off the 14th floor balcony to escape the pain, chaos, and distress. I was angry with God for leading me here, only to abandon me as well. I had to have connection. I had to have people. I felt no one cared we were even there. No one was there to comfort us. I remembered the previous month our visiting language teacher had mentioned a homeschool co-op his girls had attended at the local international Christian school, so I looked it up. I started taking my older 2 kids to this group twice a week, and the youngest joined the preschool on those days. It was 3 hours in the car, crossing the city in heavy traffic each time we went, but it was the only place Chad and I felt safe leaving our kids. I was desperate for community or a place of belonging, so I started volunteering in the library, checking in and shelving books 1 day a week. When Patrick and Heidi found out we had plugged into the International Christian School, Patrick sent a text to our entire agency chat group that we had located the school with all the expats. The comment sounded cheerful and upbeat, but it was actually demeaning and derogatory because there's a negative stigma against missionaries who choose to gather only with other expats while on the field. I was hurt. We tried to meet with other couples in the church in February. We invited one in particular every single week, but their answer was always no. They were too busy with their ministry tasks. There were no visitors to our home, no other welcome invitations into relationship from other church members, no women's Bible study, no reach out messages to me, nothing. My Hindu neighbor showed more hospitality welcoming our family into their country and culture than anyone else in the church. She was very sweet and spoke broken English. We went out once together for coffee into a plant pot stand on the side of a road. She helped me get plants for our home. She let me borrow her beautiful dresses for 2 different weddings in January, invited us over for tea, cooked various ethnic dishes for us to try, and even had our family over for dinner once. Besides attending Tuesday morning prayer meetings with the church staff and planning for the music school launch, Chad served on the church's worship team on a regular basis. He was really enjoying playing his trumpet and helping the team. I volunteered to sing harmony on worship team one week and helped with decorations inside the church as well. In early February, we participated in a community sports day at the International Christian School and met some other expat families. It was a welcome sight, and I was eager to meet people I could actually communicate with, since half the church we attended couldn't speak English. I wanted to meet some new faces and names and learn tips about surviving this particular field of service. We met a number of them, chatting and gathering any helpful tidbits of information as an expatriate in this city. Unfortunately, the air was polluted that day, which is possibly why our 3-year-old daughter picked up a lung virus the second week of February. Her little chest was heaving rapidly, trying to breathe. Patrick came upstairs to see her and immediately recommended a trip to the ER. Seeing his attentive care for our daughter that evening was a refreshing sight. He took Chad and our daughter to the hospital while I stayed home, since our older 2 were already in bed for the night. I wondered what I had done bringing my children here. Heidi actually messaged me that night and asked how I was doing when my daughter was at the ER. I guess it took an ER visit to finally get their attention. After the hospital visit, Chad and I took our youngest to a local pediatrician and began administering medication via nebulizer at home. By the end of February, our field team leaders had finally settled into their new flat 5 floors beneath ours in the same apartment tower. It was comforting to know they were so close rather than a 10-minute Uber drive away. However, my trust had long been broken. Anytime we'd met, it was only about our progress on the music academy. They never really asked how we were doing or if there was anything they could do to help. When I continued pressing Chad, and he finally felt it was the opportune time to ask the pastor for regular team meetings, we had been on the field for over 3 months. I was beyond myself, feeling overwhelmed by culture shock, isolation, betrayal, and sabotage, although I couldn't have put it to words back then. A team meeting was scheduled and we went downstairs to their apartment. We sat on the couch and I managed to blurt, "There is no support structure here." Heidi immediately replied, "You have no idea what it was like for me when I first got here." I then shared my frustration about not being able to connect with the other agency couple when they visited several months ago. I needed an escape. Chad and I argued about taking a vacation. He was adamant we'd be there for church on Sunday mornings, so we should go during the week. I was adamant to leave over the weekend. Why did I have to be there every Sunday when Heidi was gone 2 Sundays in January for their vacation and shifting apartments? Why did I need to follow all the expectations on our list when they hadn't even kept their one? What was Heidi doing all day anyway while her kids were in school? She only lived 5 floors below me, but all was silent from her week after week. It wasn't that she didn't make an effort to be a friend. It was the fact that there was no effort being put forth as a field team leader. In all honesty, I needed to take a week off with our family. I didn't trust Patrick and Heidi anymore. I no longer had the desire to serve their church community, having been dropped on the field and left alone to tread water in survival mode. Chad and I argued a long time, my voice escalating as I begged and pleaded to leave for the weekend. I won the argument. We left for our son's birthday weekend and drove to the south end of town to stay in a hotel. I was about to break. I pled with the Lord in prayer, God, if there's something more than this, rescue me. I fasted for 3 days, drinking only coffee and water. I broke my fast on a snack we shared with Patrick and Heidi at another team meeting to discuss the summer plan for opening the music school. It wasn't a team meeting to ask how we were or what we needed. It was merely a business meeting about the academy. Again. A couple weeks later, Chad and I spent a day rearranging the current music building. Aside from the bakery kitchen, NGO office, and church staff offices, Patrick and Heidi had filled whatever space remained in that building with stuff from their former 2-story apartment, since they had downsized to a single-story flat. Patrick had lost his former office in their home and was also moving it into the building. We rearranged and tidied the place, preparing for a small Sunday morning crowd. There was an emerging virus, and the government was mandating gatherings not to exceed a certain number. The church was setting up both buildings in order to split up the congregation. Patrick and his church staff were very pleased with the transformation we were able to make in such short time. We carried on as usual those few weeks of March, starting to get into the swing of things. I felt we were making strides with settling into the culture, finding our routine, and finally meeting every Saturday morning with our field team leaders. There was hope. We could do this. We could hang in there and make it work. We do not want you to be uninformed, brothers and sisters, about the troubles we experienced in the province of Asia. We were under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure, so that we despaired of life itself. Indeed, we felt we had received the sentence of death. But this happened that we might not rely on ourselves, but on God, who raises the dead. 2 Corinthians 1:8 and 9.